Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're looking at Ezekiel 5 to 8, and I don't know that it's less wild than Ezekiel 1 to 4. There's a few less crazy images of angels and cherubs and stuff. But as we jump into Ezekiel 5 to 8, there is more warnings of judgment, and I think what I'd like to dig into today is some of the specifics of that judgment. So as we read over Ezekiel 5 to 8, Jenny, what are you noticing?
To be totally honest, we open up this reading with chapter 5 talking about Ezekiel like cutting off his hair and setting it on fire and like storing it in weird places. I don't understand the purpose of that. Like, what is the
This guy's got a tough job.
significance?
He's being asked to do so many weird things. So yesterday he was like laying in the street cooking his food with poop. That actually had
So stupid sounding.
I
Like,
understand
why
if
do we believe this sometimes?
none of you can take us seriously at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, it's there. It's in the Bible.
So the hair thing is like a visual representation of what's going to happen to the people in Jerusalem. So 1/3 of them are going to be carried off, 1/3 of them are going to be destroyed, and the other 1/3 of them are also going to be destroyed. Like ultimately, to me, what it shows is how tiny of a remnant is going to exist.
I literally just saw this as I was asking the question. In a commentary I was looking at, it says that like shaving their heads and their beards was
Yeah.
a sign of mourning. So like this could also be
Yep.
him just like preparing like to be mourning for the city of Jerusalem because they're all going to be taken away. So I guess I don't he was also like weighing his hair on scales.
Well, because he's trying to make sure it's a third and a third and a third.
Oh my word, so weird.
But the thing that should get your attention, because it is a visual aid of what is being taught, is that very
Oh, whoa! Can I interrupt? The
yes.
third and the third and the third. I read over this section. Were you about to go the different directions of how
Go
everybody
ahead.
dies?
Go ahead.
Okay, so a third of them are going to die by famine, third of them are going to die by plague, and third of them are going to die by help me out. What's the other one? I just saw it and lost it.
Well, they're like carried off or executed in war. Like it's just this painful, terrible thing. I think
That is crazy.
God talks about unsheathing His sword against them.
Yes.
The thing that should get your attention
Weird.
is yes, that does happen. That is how many people perished. But very, very, very few people remain faithful and are delivered. And that is the very small amount of hair that is lasting represents the very small remnant of people that God has left for Himself.
But the some that would be survivors are like not actually gonna like make it either.
Very few.
Yeah.
And we've seen in Jeremiah that the very few that are left as survivors still are pretty flaky. Because they're the ones that are like, yeah, we're going to go to Egypt now. We don't want to be here. So there's there are those who survive, and then there are the faithful to God of those who survive, and that's an even smaller number.
Well, see right there, that just sums it up. Like there is significance in it, and the whole idea of like cutting off his hair anyway is just like this super humble sackcloth and ashes kind of deal. Like, all right, God's gonna do what He's gonna do, and there's nothing we can do about it. So,
I mean,
okay, all makes sense now.
so
All
then
is good in the world.
next time you think your pastor is too dramatic,
Oh man,
be glad he's not Ezekiel, I guess,
chopping his
laying
hair
in the
off.
street and chopping off his hair. And it makes sense that not many people wanted to be prophets because God asked
Yeah, seriously.
Ezekiel to do some pretty bizarre things. There are some really interesting themes that I want to pull out of chapter 7 specifically, because God gives up an indictment against the people several times for their sins, and it's clear that they have fallen into idolatry on a pretty regular basis. We can talk about that in a second. But it's also clear that they have found so much faith in their money. And
Yeah.
that is in chapter 7, let's see, verse 19, we can say. They cast their silver into the streets, and their gold is like an unclean thing. Their silver and gold are not able to deliver them in the day of wrath of the Lord. They cannot satisfy their hunger or fill their stomachs with it, for it was the stumbling block of their iniquity. His beautiful ornament they used for pride, and they made their abominable images and their detestable things of it. Therefore I've made it an unclean thing to them, and I gave it into the hands of foreigners for prey, and the wicked of the earth for spoil, and they shall profane it. So it's this idea that God allowed them to prosper. Like God ultimately is the one who blessed them with all the things they had. There was a time in their history where they had many, many, many things. And we've talked about how all those possessions blinded them and allowed them to think that they were being prospered by God when in fact they were no longer concerned about God and they were just worshiping their possessions. And so God basically says like, "Hey, you found all your hope and your gold and your silver, try eating it. Like it's not going to help you."
Something else that's interesting that it follows that passage. So not only is like their money is worthless to them, there's also this idea that they could perhaps like almost like pay off
Buy their
God.
way out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, which is so ridiculous. But not only is that not going to work, their gold, their riches, it's not going to buy them food. Like they're promised
Yep.
famine.
Yep.
So like that's gonna happen. And then following that, there's also this idea of like, well, like God's temple can also save us, and that also fails because God just hands it over. That's like that
It
reference in
gets
the following
completely destroyed. They
verses
break down the walls,
of
they carry off the
robbers
things.
and yeah, all of the things being taken away. So like every single hope that they had that wasn't God, their gold, their idols, their temple, it doesn't matter. That's crazy.
So then if you follow that thread down to verse 26, this is chapter 7, verse 26. Disaster comes upon disaster. Rumor follows rumor. They seek a vision from the prophet, while the law perishes from the priest and the counsel from the elders. This is a good little snippet of how their community was supposed to work. The prophet was supposed to be receiving visions from the Lord to give instruction. The priests were supposed to understand God's law to give instruction. And the elders were supposed to be wise to practice wisdom in discerning what was right and what was wrong. And so Ezekiel here is illustrating that every person in power has failed the role that they were supposed to fulfill. And now when the people go for direction, there's no direction to be found.
Well, not totally that either, because they replaced true prophets
Yep.
with their own ideas of who those true prophets were, who were just tickling their ears, saying the things that they wanted to hear.
These are the guys that are
So,
throwing Jeremiah into
yes,
pits. Yeah.
exactly. So that's kind of crazy as well, because they have the right guys, but they're not listening to them because it's not what they want to hear.
So chapter 8 then carries us through a couple different images that God shows to Ezekiel. Each one followed by him, God basically saying, "Oh, you thought that was bad? Wait until you see the next one."
Oh man.
And it's basically revealing how much idolatrous behavior is happening in the land. Probably one of the more, well, they're all pretty scandalous. But one of them would be in chapter 8, verse 12. Then he said to me, "Son of man, have you seen what the elders of the house of Israel are doing in the dark, each in his room of pictures?"
Well, before we even get there, though,
Oh,
I think it's important to set the stage. So, like, we go from, like, why everything's happening the way it's happening to Ezekiel having this vision. And the vision is very specific. And it's almost like, it's like a dream. You're going through, like, I guess you're going through, like, piece by piece of the temple, but, like, more and
yes.
more and more
Closer and closer to
into
the center.
holy of yeah, like the
exactly.
holiest, the most holy place. And as you get further into what is supposed to be this holy place, there are just like darker and darker and darker things that are being revealed that are happening, like figuratively, but also like, I don't know, it's very real as well. Like
Yeah,
it's figurative as in the vision itself, but these are actual things that are happening that are just like awful, and God is revealing it to Ezekiel to warn the people.
And basically, what it all boils down to, the reason I was talking about the pictures, is that God is revealing that the elders of the nation have their own little rooms in their own houses to worship false gods. They have pictures of these gods that they are worshiping, and they think that nobody knows about it or cares about it, and they certainly think that God doesn't know about it and care about it. And God's revealing to Ezekiel, "I definitely know about it, and I definitely care about it." And like the culmination of this vision, thank you for calling out, like it is this progression further and further closer to the Holy of Holies. It says in verse, what is it, 16? And behold, at the entrance of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men with their backs to the temple of the Lord and their faces toward the east, worshiping the sun toward the east. So it doesn't explicitly say who these people are, but if you look at the location of where they are, it's most likely the priests of God worshiping the sun when the sun comes up. And so they're like in their role as priest of the Lord, actively worshiping the Son and disregarding the Lord. They have their back to the Lord. And so it does follow like, man, the people have really fallen and the sin is basically everywhere and God's judgment is coming.
Well, and there's like a verse a little bit before that in verse, I believe, like 12 and 13, where it's talking about like when they find those idols within their homes, like in secret.
Yep.
There's like this idea that they say the Lord doesn't see us. He's forsaken this land. So like assuming that God is just like this like petty person who doesn't care about them. So who cares? We can do this secretly. God doesn't know. And like it just like they belittle God so much that they're like, well, whatever. He doesn't care about us anymore. He doesn't even know about these things. Like, are you dumb?
Listen, I mean, have you ever done something like that? Have you ever thought through things that way? Like maybe it is, you know what? I'm so far gone. What's one more thing piled on top of it? Maybe it is God wasn't there for me when I needed him. I'm not going to serve him right now because he didn't do what I wanted, or he didn't allow this to go the way that I thought that it should. Or are you literally thinking like, I can hide this? Yeah. I mean, ultimately, if you think you can hide it, you think you can hide it from people, but really what you think is that you can hide it from God, that your little personal sin will stay your little personal sin and it'll be a secret. And what Ezekiel is revealing is that no, God knows all of it. He sees all of it. You're not fooling anybody. So don't hide your sin. Like I know I've told so many people as I've worked with lots of different people, the worst thing you can do in your life is lie. Like if you just refuse to lie and always tell the truth, even if it's a bad truth, if you at least tell the truth, you will guard yourself against deception because deception is so dangerous. And so I think the your part for today, I think there are a few. So I'll give you a quick your part buffet. One, don't trust in money. It's going to fail you. It's not going to do anything for you, and it will ultimately disappoint you. Two, these people want truth so bad, and they can't find it because they're so far from God's word and so far from God's law. So if you keep God's word and God's law close to you, it will be hard to depart from it. And three, you can't hide from God. So don't hide from God. That's silly. If you are convinced that what you're doing is a secret and nobody will find it out, you will be very embarrassed when people do in fact find out. There's actually verses about that. Like your sin will find you out. It will be brought to light. That is a guarantee. And so do yourself a favor and confess your sin. Stop hiding the things you're trying to hide. Try to bring reconciliation where you need reconciliation and continue to live a life that is honoring God. We do not want to find ourselves in the same kind of place that these folks in Ezekiel are.
No way.
So we'll be back again tomorrow. I'm sure Ezekiel will be doing something wild and crazy again. We'll see you then. Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplанyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.